Good evening. First of all, your meditations as a whole, as a group, are deeper and more meaningful. I can tell that the very moment I come up on this platform. I can feel it envelop me. And so that you will understand the nature of it, I must say this to you, that this is not because of any human love that you feel for me or that you feel for each other or that I feel for you. Because even though human love is present between us, human love is not a power. The mother in the human world who prays for her child has an abundance of human love, and her love and her prayers are mostly of very little avail. And the same, the love that a child has for his parent may be a tremendously deep love, but usually it has no spiritual power whatsoever. As a matter of fact, there is no spiritual power in human love. And therefore, for a meditation to have power, for a meditation to show forth God, the subject of human love does not enter. It can be there. It can be there as an added thing. But the human love in and of itself would not be a spiritual power in meditation or otherwise. When your meditation deepens, it is because your realization of spiritual love has deepened. And that means that you are not loving humanly, but rather that you are bearing witness or recognizing the divine sonship. In other words, if all of us in this room were perfect strangers to each other, if we had come here tonight for the very first time, and enough of us in the room would look around and acknowledge divine sonship, that would bring forth this same spiritual love that we are doing now. In other words, it has taken us several years to reach the point of inwardly recognizing and acknowledging that we are spiritual beings, that we are divine, that we are the Son of God, and that regardless of any human failings at any given moment, whether we are humanly ill or humanly sinning in some way or humanly poor, none of that changes the fact of our true identity. And therefore we are looking upon each other, you might call it, with forgiveness. That is, we are seeing through the human frailty and neither condemning, judging, or criticizing, but looking right through and acknowledging there is the Christ of God. Now this is spiritual love. And in proportion as you are enabled to look out through your eyes and acknowledge that the rest of us are divine beings, regardless of what you may have heard about us today, regardless of what you may think about us, regardless of what human concept you may have, if you have reached that stage where there is no judgment, no criticism, no condemnation, knowing, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do when they do erroneously, and acknowledge there is the Son of God, then you are loving spiritually. In the same way, when you are sitting in meditation and you are not trying to get God to do anything to any of the rest of us or to any of your patients or students, when you are abiding in the realization of your spiritual sonship, in the realization of the divine sonship of all the rest of us, when you are communing within with the Spirit of God, you are in deep and spiritual meditation. When you are trying to influence God or get God to do something, you are back on the wheel of human love, and you are not bringing forth spiritual fruitage. Spiritual fruitage cannot come forth from demanding anything of God or expecting anything of God, but only in contemplating the isness of God, even if it is necessary only to close your eyes and remember. Just think, we are in the fruitful season of the year, and everything bears witness to the abundance of God, to God's great gifts to the world. Wherever we look, we see evidences of the richness of God's glory and of the impersonal nature of it, since it would seem that the grass is just as green in front of one house as another, the trees bear the same fruit, the bushes the same flowers. God's grace is universal, impersonal, impartial. God is no respecter of persons. And just see now how we can witness the fullness of God's love to earth and to man. And if it is necessary to commune any longer, you can go on to remember that just a few short weeks ago the trees were barren and the grass was brown. And yet, in spite of the appearance of barrenness, the law of God was operating throughout nature. And just a few weeks more, and the operation of that law became evident as this abundance of spring, freshness, resurrection, the dead coming to life. And so it is that you can look forward and say, and there will be another barren season when the evidence of the eyes will testify to death, to barrenness, to lack. But now I have learned my lessons, and I realize there is a rhythm of God. There is a rhythm of God. And all we have to do is abide in patience. Abide in this word. The law of God, which is a law of love, is operating. And in due season, fruitage will appear. And because it is universal, it will appear in my experience and your experience. And this, you see, is a spiritual meditation, a powerful meditation, and one that will bear fruit richly in the experience of all of us. You have not asked anything of God. You have not expected God to go out of his way to do something of a personal nature. You have contemplated the is of God, that which God is. You have contemplated omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience. And in this contemplation, you are in a meditation. And you will find that such meditations lead you even deeper within yourself until it will eventually turn into an actual communion. And in this communion, you will feel the presence of God as love flowing to you, within you. And you'll feel a love flowing from you to God, as if there were two of you. There really is only one. It is the inner self and the outer self in communion, two parts of one self. And so it is that these meditations now are showing forth the fruitage of your years of study and contemplation. And it is from this that our greater works will come, because you will find that the outer picture is but the reflected activity of the state of your inner consciousness. And while you are sowing to the Spirit in this way, you are reaping spiritual grace. And now that brings us to this first question. When contact within is truly made, shouldn't one expect that to appear in improvement, better health, morals, government, at every level of consciousness, in the way it can be understood in the awakening of human consciousness? Indeed, yes. As a matter of fact, that is the entire purpose of following a message of this kind, that you are not to seek things, you are not to seek in the outer world for improvement. You are to seek only the attainment of a spiritual state of consciousness. You are to rise into that state of consciousness that recognizes one power, recognizes all mankind as being really the divine Son of God in their real being, and as you rise to that level of consciousness, it naturally outpictures itself in the form of health, harmony, wholeness, completeness, perfection, in every way necessary to our everyday experience. There is, however, this to be said, that in our actual experience, the outer picture does not always change as rapidly as we believe that our consciousness is changing. In other words, because we intellectually accept the fact that God is the only power, does not mean that instantly error will lose all of its seeming power, because we have not yet attained that consciousness. And therefore, something of this nature takes place. Whereas there may be changes within us of one nature or another, there may be great changes within us. Somehow, there seems to be in one or more directions a lack of conforming to what we believe to be the state of our consciousness. And let me illustrate that. I have given this to many classes, but the illustration fits in here. After my own experience of my first illumination, my entire life changed. The past was dead, and a whole new life began. But on one particular point, my demonstration yielded slowly. At times it looked as if it weren't going to yield at all, and that was on the subject of supply. Supply gave me my hardest battle and longest one. And I had many ups and downs. I had the supply problem met once when it seemed to me that I was firm in the conviction that because I was in God's work, that God was meeting my daily need. And for a while that seemed to be so. And then all of a sudden the picture changed and the need was not being met promptly or abundantly. And then a second unfoldment of supply came. And this one carried me forward for quite a while, and it was more along the line of God's presence. And then again it fell away. And it just seemed as if supply was one of those things that was not going to manifest in my life. But there came a third revelation. And with that third revelation, the entire situation broke. It changed and remained permanent. And this time, it was a revelation which really is the foundation of the message of the infinite way. It is the reason there is an infinite way. Because without this revelation, there would have been no major principle on which this work could be based. And this revelation had to do with the word I. Now you see, up to that moment, I meant Joel. And Joel meant he had to have food and clothing and housing. And that meant it had to come from somewhere. And since he was in the spiritual healing work, naturally it should come from patience or from students or from gratitude. But you see, that was all wrong as a spiritual picture. And in this final revelation, it dawned, light came, that I isn't Joel, I is God. I is infinite divine being. I is the offspring of God or Christ of God. But I and God are really one, not two. And all that God is, I am, and all that the Father hath is mine. And now it's a sin to have to earn a living. It's a sin to expect someone to give me a living. Why? Because I can heal the multitudes, I can feed the multitudes, therefore I have an infinity of supply. And my error has been in the sense of separation that set up a Joel being who had to be fed, clothed, and housed, whereas I, being one with God, all that the Father hath is mine, and I am not dependent on man whose breath is in his nostril, even if he likes me. I am not dependent on man whose breath is in his nostril, even if he's grateful. I and my Father are one, and my only dependence is not on God, but on my relationship to God. The fact that I and my Father are one. And now, in spite of the fact that it was in the depths of the depression in the States, now supply increased, this week more than last, next week more than the week before, and so forth and so on, until it was only a very few months that all of my affairs were straightened out and a sufficiency coming in, and very quickly 12 baskets full left over. And so the foundation of the infinite way was given me. I is God. I and the Father are one. Thou seest me, thou seest the Father that sent me. And in my spiritual identity, there is no place where God leaves off and I begin, for we are one and not two, and all that God is embodied within me. God has given me jurisdiction over all that is in the sky and the air and the earth and the waters beneath the earth. And as long as I do not look outside of my own being, as long as I reckon, as long as I realize that whatever the nature of God is the nature of my being. Whatever the quantity of God is the quantity of my being. Whatever the quality of God is the quality of my being. And God is pouring his infinite selfhood through me. And it is for this reason that healings can take place. It is for this reason that those who come to me with a problem of supply can have their problem met. Not out of my storehouses or barns, but out of the infinite storehouse of God, which I am, and which I recognize you to be. For this is not a personal relationship that sets me apart from you, but in proving it to me, it proves to me that it is a universal truth which must be a truth about you. Now, with this, the outer picture changes, because whereas I may have intellectually known this before, certainly it was not a realized truth. It was not spiritually discerned. And so that particular problem had to wait until the dawn of realization. And that is what is meant when practitioners and teachers tell us, be grateful for your problem. Not that anyone likes to have a problem, but do you not see that if it had not been for that particular problem, if I had been having enough dollars come in to meet my needs, do you not see that I would not have been driven deep within myself for an answer to the problem of supply? And if I had not made that demonstration, then I could not have made the demonstration for the entire worldwide infinite way activity without a membership, without dues, without asking anyone to support this activity, and yet be able for 14 years to meet all of its bills around the world. All through that one realization that cost me quite a few years of heartache and wonder and agonizing. So it is that to have a person's health met quickly without some real digging on their part, some real sacrifice, if you want to call it that, of time, effort, prayer, meditation, is of course a fine thing humanly, but spiritually it is not of great value. Spiritually, that great value comes from the depth of the degree of our own problem and our willingness to get down inside and work it out, even though at times we may have help to lift us in consciousness to where it can be better worked out. So it is then that it is absolutely true that as your spiritual consciousness evolves, the outer experience, physically, mentally, morally, financially, human relationship-wise, all of these improve. Not necessarily in accordance with your intellectual knowledge of the principles, but you're working with the principles until the spiritual realization dawns. And that is why the Master said, few there be that enter. Few there be that enter. Because the human race does not have the spiritual urge or drive. The human race can be very well satisfied with ease and matter. Give them a fairly healthy body and a fairly comfortable purse in keeping with their idea of abundance, and you have a race of people who never will seek God. They will be perfectly satisfied with the orthodox forms of worship, whereby if they go to church occasionally or have a communion occasionally, they feel they're ready for entrance into heaven, which won't do for us. Next question. Isn't all spiritual healing a regeneration? a self-purification, as Jesus implied when he said, "For their sakes I sanctify myself." Yes, of course. A spiritual healing brings with it a regeneration. And again, let me tell you that in the actual working out of the problem, there may be a period of time between the healing and the outward effects of the spiritual regeneration. And again, I give you my personal experience. It was 1921 when I was given only 3 months to live. And within 3 months I was completely healed. But it was through the work of a practitioner. And so my own regeneration wasn't too great. True, it kept me searching, but there were no outward or visible signs of any change in my way of life. And it was 1929, therefore 8 years later, when that experience of the rebirth took place. And so the healing actually must have done something inside of my soul. But just as Saul of Tarsus had his awakening on the road to Damascus, but it was 8 years later before he started on his first missionary journey. He went down into Arabia and remained alone for 8 years. And we are given to understand that during this 8 years, the Spirit was at work within him, preparing him for his ministry. And this must have happened to me because the very day after, the second day after my first spiritual experience, I was doing healing work and have never stopped. And so you see that don't have the idea for a moment that we have a spiritual light and then wake up the next day and find that all outer circumstances have changed. The inner being has changed, sometimes noticeably so, sometimes not noticeably so, but eventually it does happen and the awakening takes place. Should it be expected that through the uplifted thought of those present, healings may occur to those who we are helping? Yes. Yes, indeed. And in proportion to their receptivity. In other words, you may be lifted up to the very height of the Christ, but it may not touch your mother or your brother or your sister. That was Jesus' experience. Remember that none of his family followed him throughout the 3 years of his ministry until the very end. They were untouched. And so it is with many on this path. Regardless of how high they rise, those nearest and dearest to them do not always follow. And so it is. There are many right now who are looking to us for healing. But do you know that in some cases that is the very barrier to their receiving the healing? In other words, their thought is way down here on the loaves and fishes, and they're thinking only in terms of the pain stopping or the growth being moved or something of that nature, and they themselves are blocking their own healing. Because in spiritual healing, we are not engaged in changing the conditions of their body. We are engaged in awakening them to their true identity. We are engaged in the spiritual work of opening consciousness, awakening consciousness to the spiritual realities, and of course, those who are looking to us for a revelation of God, those who are looking to us to be led to the realm of God, those who are looking to us for spiritual regeneration, every one of those should be healed while we are in this class. Because I, if I be lifted up, shall draw all men unto me. And in the degree that we as a class are lifted in consciousness, we are drawing our patients and our students to some measure of that consciousness. It is very noticeable in our work that whenever we have a class, that students write from all parts of the globe that they felt the spiritual impulse and experienced sometimes healing, sometimes spiritual regeneration, sometimes the opening of the idea of supply, sometimes the real nature of human relationships, divine relationships. But of this you may be assured, all of our very serious students in every part of the world are benefiting by this class. And the reason is that they know enough of spiritual truth to know that there is but one consciousness, and we are all united in that one consciousness. And therefore, the highest state of consciousness lifts all the others up into it. Christian Science teaches that the body is a sensual concept. The Infinite Way teaches that the body is the temple of the living God. Would you clarify this, please? You see, we are always talking double talk. We are always talking in two languages. And students must recognize this. Otherwise, they will make the same mistake that has wrecked India. Now, India has one of the greatest spiritual heritages of any nation on earth. India is the seat of original spiritual revelation. India has within its teachings some of the most spiritual revealed truths ever given to the world. And why is India in its present condition? And let nobody answer that it is ignorance or that it is the result of colonialism, for behind these lies the error. Gautama the Buddha had a revelation of absolute truth, beyond which there is no known revelation. In other words, there are other revelations equal to it, but none beyond it. In this revelation, he saw that this appearance world is Maya or illusion. Now, if you understand this rightly, you have the kernel of all mystical teaching. If you understand it incorrectly, it will wreck you as it has wrecked India. Gautama the Buddha understood what it meant, and he demonstrated it by his healings, by the spread of his message all across India at a time when they had no telegraphs, fast mails, or airplanes. And yet it spread like wildfire. And it spread because of its fruitage. And its fruitage came about in this wise. In the Advaita teaching of India, it is revealed that there is but one ego, one I, one I am that I am, and that this I that I am constitutes the consciousness of the universe. Then that which appears as a mortal scene is not a mortal scene. The way it appears to us constitutes mortality, whereas it itself is this divine universe. Therefore, the illusion is not out here in the world, for illusion cannot be externalized. You can write that sentence in your mind in capitals. Illusion cannot be externalized. Illusion is a deceptive state of thought, and it can only take place within an individual's mind, not external to it. And therefore, this world is God's world. It is the temple of the living God. But as we see it with finite eyes and ears, that which we see is but the illusory picture of the reality that is there. And the illusion isn't out in the world, it is in the mind that is falsely seeing the world. Now then, that teaching is the basis of every mystical teaching, including the infinite way. That is the revelation of the infinite way, a re-revelation, and that is this: I myself am one with God. Therefore I am infinite, and I am eternal, and I am immortal. And my body is the temple of the living God. Now just remember that when I declare this, I am not declaring it solely for Joel. I am declaring this as a universal truth about every individual who exists on this earth, or whoever has existed, or whoever will exist. I am infinite, eternal, spiritual being, one with God, the very Christ of God, the Son of God, the offspring of God, not separate and apart from God, but absolutely one with God. And this is a universal truth. Therefore, I am looking out and seeing you. And you are this infinite, spiritual, divine being whose body is the temple of God. Do I see that with my eyesight? No. With my eyesight, I see young and middle-aged and old. And I see sick and well, and I see poor and rich. But at least I have sense enough to know that none of that is out there in this room. That is an illusory picture in the human mind. And because there is only one human mind, that is the illusory picture in your mind and mine. But it has no externalized existence. I am spiritual integrity itself, in my mind, in my soul, in my being, and in my body. This is a universal truth. And the way my eyes see the world is Maya, illusion. But the illusion isn't out there, the illusion is up here. Therefore, it cannot be corrected out there. And that is why prayer, as it is normally known, must fail. That is why prayer is a complete failure. That is why in the tens of thousands of churches that exist, not one of them, except the few who have awakened, can make their prayers effective. The reason is They are trying to improve the illusion. It would still be an illusion. It would just be a good illusion instead of a bad illusion. Now, let me read something to you from the newspaper. And the date of this was April 25th. Miss Betty Lou, who has a girl of 10, received the nation's prayers to spare her right hand from cancer, will be married June 4th. She is now 21 and will become the bride of so-and-so. In 1949, the young girl asked readers of the Memphis Commercial Appeal to pray that I may not lose my hand and that I may soon completely recover. Millions prayed for her, but doctors later decided that the right hand must be amputated to save her life. Tell me what was wrong with the prayers of millions. Millions. Now, you know, only church people pray. It wasn't the non-churchgoers who prayed. It was the churchgoers, and millions of them, but they didn't save her hand. Not all the millions of them. Why? Because all they were doing was trying to pray to save an illusion, try to change an illusion, pray to do something to this illusory picture, which they thought was out here in a girl, and which existed no place except in the human mind's belief in two powers. One person may have saved that girl's hands. One person could have saved that girl's hands. One person who would not have tried to save a hand. One person who would not have tried to cure a cancer. One person who would have realized God constitutes individual being, and any appearance to the contrary is illusory, is a picture in the mind without spiritual substance, without spiritual cause, without spiritual law, without spiritual entity or identity, maya, illusion. One person who would have recognized that if you see an ocean out in the desert, don't call for rubber hoses to drain it off. If you see a city in the distance on the desert, don't go looking for a wrecking crew to pull it down. Recognize it as illusion and go through it. And you will find that it has no more substance than any illusion. And so it is that in healing work, or in living spiritually, don't try to change this outside world. Don't try to change your friends and relatives. Don't try to change their temperament, their disposition, or their health, but recognize within your own being the very omnipresence and omnipotence and omniscience of God makes it impossible for sin, disease, death, lack, and limitation to exist as externalized reality. They can exist only in the mortal dream, which is a belief in two powers. And in proportion as you surrender the belief in two powers, you find the dream punctured. You see, your body is the temple of the living God. When you look in the mirror, you do not see your body. You see the human mind's concept of your body, a purely illusory concept. And as long as you're looking out through your eyes, all you can see is the illusory concept. It is only when in your meditation, when you are realizing the grace of God, the omnipotence and omnipresence of God, that you catch momentary glimpses of our divine being. and sometimes even a flash of the spiritual body, which is really light. It is really light. You know that it is light because you know, don't you, that there is no such thing as sound. You know that there are only vibrations or waves going out from my mouth. And there isn't a bit of sound. The sound only takes place when those vibrations touch your ear. And then it is that your ear transforms the vibrations into sound. And in the same way, there is no color in these flowers, and no color in my suit or in your dresses. There is only a vibration, a light vibration, completely colorless. And it is only when that vibration reaches your eye that your eye changes those vibrations into color. That is why it is possible for a colorblind person to see an entirely different color than is there. It is because the vibration is hitting their eye at a different rate. And so it does not translate it into the color that it should. And so it is that what you see with your eye is not reality, and it is not physicality. It is a vibration. And in its true essence, it is light. And this you sometimes see. Can you tell the difference between your experience of seeing and talking with those who have passed on and what spiritualists claim as their experience? Well, the only thing that I can say about that is this, that I have had no experience after the first 3 days of the passing. I never at any time have had any contact with those who have passed from this scene after that first 3 days. And therefore, whatever I have been aware of are these individuals here and now. And usually not with any of the recorded messages that are usually associated with spiritualism. As a matter of fact, in only one case was there a message of that nature. And even that was only a message, you might say, in code. But otherwise, it was not a contact in which receiving messages played any part, nor was it a contact that took place any longer than 3 days after their passing. Now this question I have no way of answering. It has to do with all religions throughout the world, and the advanced schools of thought are expecting the Christ on earth, either by using the body of one of his disciples. I know nothing about that subject, so I cannot answer it. Now, we come back to this. In your life, lived as fourth dimensional consciousness, you are seeking nothing from the dream. Now just remember this, that when you are seeking supply, or when you are seeking companionship, or when you are seeking a home, or when you are seeking employment, all you are seeking is an improved dream, an improved illusion. All you are seeking is your own concept of good, which after you get it may not prove to be the thing you wanted. Therefore, remember this very basic premise. You are seeking nothing of this world. You are seeking only the realization of your oneness with God. You are seeking nothing out here coming to you. You are seeking whatever it is deep within you to come forth into expression, into conscious awareness. In other words, the kingdom of God is within you. Truth is within ourselves. And our attempt always is to open out a way. That is our life on this spiritual plane. Never seeking to improve the dream. Never seeking to enrich the dream. Never seeking to heal the dream. Always turning to the kingdom of God for something to come up from within. Then you see, even though it still comes in ways that appear to be external, actually they're not. They have their basis in this invisible action. In other words, when you see the fruit on trees, you are seeing the fruitage of an invisible life, an invisible activity, an invisible unfoldment appearing visibly. And so it is, as you lead this spiritual life, looking to no man whose breath is in his nostril, seeking nothing in the outer plane, but living in a continual contemplation with this life stream, life force, source of life, storehouse of life, temple of life within you, and seeking only its unfoldment through you, then you will see it appear, as you see the fruit appear on the tree, as an externalization of an inward grace. Back in the earliest period of our work, I wrote, or it was written, that if you receive $1 spiritually, your supply will be made for the balance of your days, and abundantly. And what that meant was this: if you have withdrawn your gaze from the outer scene, not changing your mode of life outside, but changing it inwardly to a constant recognition that since I and the Father are one, and all that the Father hath is mine, my good must unfold from within me, and I am not looking to man whose breath is in his nostril. I am not expecting it from anyone. I know that I embody it within me. And as I live in that consciousness, one day something will come into my possession. It may be currency, it may be a piece of art, it may be some other form of good, but it will come, as it were, out of the blue, in the sense that wherever it came from, or whoever gave it to me, was not under any obligation to do so, had no particular reason to do so, and I could recognize that it really was a prompting of God. Then I will know that really God has performed this. From that moment on, all the rest appears the same way, for the simple reason, once we have demonstrated the presence of God, the realization of God, God becomes our way of life. And the unfoldment then is always from within, even though it appears to be coming from the outer world. So that the entire basis of the transcendental life is living consciously one with God, living in the consciousness of my oneness with God, living consciously as if the infinite all were within my own being, which it is. The kingdom of God, allness, is within me. The kingdom of grace, the kingdom of love, the kingdom of power. When I do that and follow it up with the second step, never seeking to use God power. Do you see what they were doing here with this girl? They were all praying to God to get God to do something, and thereby dishonoring God. For how could God not be doing all that God should be doing? And how could anyone, even a million, influence God to do something that God isn't doing? The righteous prayer would have been the realization of God as omnipresence, as pure spiritual being, and all mortal concepts as the illusion of the human mind's belief in two powers. And then you can see the miracles of healing. That is why in our work it isn't any more difficult to heal someone 10,000 miles away than it is at hand. It isn't necessary to go visit them in their home and sit in their physical presence. It isn't necessary to go into a hospital and visit them in their physical presence. Why? Because you are not attempting to change the dream. You are realizing reality, and you do that where you are. The very place whereon thou standest is holy ground. You need not worship in holy mountains or holy temples. Right where you are is holy ground, and right where your patient is holy ground. So let the patient be where they are, and let you be where you are. And as long as they are reaching out for the realization of God, the grace of God, the kingdom of God, a desire to know Him aright, you'd be surprised what wonderful things happen in the lives of people who all of a sudden decide they would love to know God aright. For to know Him aright is life eternal, life harmonious, life immortal, life peaceful. Just to know Him aright is enough. And the moment we stop this search for happiness and peace and abundance, and just devote the search to know Him aright, we will find that the entire picture will fall into place. The entire outer scene will become the outward and visible evidence of God's grace. Ye seek me, but ye seek me for loaves and fishes. I fed you yesterday. Why aren't you asking about the principle? Why aren't you seeking the law that I demonstrated to you yesterday? Why just the loaves and fishes? That's the way He spoke to them. And so it is with us who have been on the metaphysical path for so long. Why seek ye just healings? Why seek ye just supply and companionship and home? Why not seek me? Because in having me, ye have allness, and all these things added to. So remember this. Out here, that which you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell is Maya or illusion, not because it is so, but because we are seeing it so. We are seeing it erroneously. For it itself, like you yourself, you are spiritual, divine, and perfect, and your body is equally so, for your body is the temple of the living God. And if ye know this truth will make you free of the mortal concept, and you will begin to perceive yourself as you are. When you awaken,
you will see him as he is. When you awaken from beholding this mortal dream as if it were reality, we will see each other as we are. And then we will love our neighbor as ourselves, because we will discover that our neighbor is ourself.